It was August 1971. Deep inside the psychology department at Stanford University, a quiet basement was about to become one of the most controversial places in scientific history. There was no murderers, no thieves, no dangerous criminals, only 24 ordinary college students, healthy, intelligent, friendly. Every one of them had passed medical and psychological tests. None had a history of violence or mental illness. They had come for a simple reason: to earn $15 a day by participating in a psychology experiment. No one imagined that within less than a week, some would cry, some would suffer emotional breakdowns, and others would begin behaving in ways that shocked even the researchers themselves. The experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks, but it ended after just 6 days. The question that still haunts psychologists today is simple: how can ordinary people become cruel so quickly? The question that started everything. Only a few years earlier, the world had watched the trials of Nazi officials. Again and again, the accused gave almost the same answer: "I was only following orders." Psychologists wanted to understand how seemingly ordinary people could participate in cruelty. Could the situation itself change human behavior? Or were only evil people capable of doing terrible things? A young Stanford professor, Philip Zimbardo, believed the answer might be lie in the power of social roles. Instead of asking people what they thought they would do, he wanted to observe what they actually did. Building a prison. The basement of Stanford's psychology building was transformed into a mock prison. Heavy doors were installed, cells were created, security procedures were designed, hidden cameras and microphones recorded nearly everything. This wasn't just a classroom exercise. The researchers wanted the environment to feel as real as possible. Even the local police agreed to help. That decision would make the experiment feel frighteningly authentic. The arrests. One Sunday morning, several volunteers were relaxing at home. Without warning, real police officers arrived. Neighbors watched in confusion. The students were handcuffed, searched, read their rights, placed in police cars, taken to an actual police station. Fingerprints were taken, mugshots were photographed. Only after the formal booking process, they were transferred to Stanford's fake prison. The realism wasn't accidental. Zimbardo believed that if the participants truly felt like prisoners, their behavior would become more natural, and it did. Losing their identity. Once inside the prison, the students stopped being known by their names. Each prisoner received only a number. They wore identical smokes instead of normal clothes. A chain was attached around one ankle, not because it physically prevented escape, but because it constantly reminded them they were prisoners. The guards wore matching uniforms. They carried whistles. Reflective sunglasses hide their eyes, making them seem anonymous and emotionally distant. Without realizing it, the experiment had already begun changing the way people saw themselves. The first night. At first, everything seemed calm. Some guards laughed, the prisoners joked, but by the second day, several prisoners rebelled. They blocked cell doors with their beds. They refused orders. The guards responded by using fire extinguishers to force open the doors. They stripped prisoners, removed mattresses, and isolated those seen as leaders. No one had instructed the guards to do these things. The harsh behavior developed on its own, or so it appeared. The emotional collapse. Within just few days, one prisoner experienced severe emotional distress. He cried uncontrollably. His thoughts became disorganized. He begged to leave. Researchers initially suspected he might be pretending. Only later did they realize his distress was genuine. More participants began showing anxiety, hopelessness, and emotional exhaustion. The moment that changed everything. Then came a visitor who saw the experiment with fresh eyes. Graduate student Christina Maslach walked through the mock prison. She watched prisoners being humiliated and guards treating them harshly. Unlike the researchers, she hadn't gradually adapted to the environment. She was shocked. She asked a simple but powerful question: "What are you doing to these boys?" That question forced Philip Zimbardo to confront something he had missed. He had become so involved in running the prison that he had stopped seeing the participants as students. The next day, the experiment ended after only 6 days. The part most people never hear. Many YouTube videos of this experiment stopped here. But the real story became even more controversial in the decades that followed. Researchers and journalists later argued that some guards may have been influenced by instructions from the research team. Some participants said they exaggerated their behavior because they believed that was expected. Others defended the study, saying the emotional reactions were still real. Today, many psychologists believe the Stanford prison experiment is historically important, but they caution against treating its conclusion as definitive science. Its methods, ethics, and interpretation remain the subject of ongoing debate. Conclusion. Whether you see it as groundbreaking experiment or a flawed study, one thing is certain. The Stanford prison experiment forced the world to ask uncomfortable questions about power, authority, and human behavior. Perhaps the biggest lesson isn't that ordinary people are secretly cruel. It's that situations, expectations, and unchecked power can shape behavior in ways we don't always recognize. And that may be the most unsettling discovery of all. The most frightening part wasn't that monsters entered the prison, it was that ordinary people slowly began believing they were no longer ordinary. The prison existed for only 6 days, but the questions it raised have lasted for more than 50 years. Subscribe for more. Thank you for watching.